Hello. Now you can hear me. My name's Jarman. I was really grateful to be asked to contribute to this project by Ben. I feel like it's the perfect time of year to be releasing this book out into the world. We're coming towards the end of the naughty fortnight of little kids knocking on your door and asking for sweets, and slightly bigger kids setting off fireworks in the park, and if you come from where I come from, going to a field and torching a few pallets and trying to get high. And I tend to write quite a lot about characters who are sort of low level up to no good, and the character in the story that I'm going to read you that I've contributed to this book is no exception. As well as being a writer, I'm also a musician, so I thought it would be a good opportunity to create a bit of music for this as well. I'm going to read you an abridged, an abridged version of my story, Stood on Your Own 2 Feet. One thing I will say for my dad, he's a bastard, but he's a grafter. He used to get back from work just as I was getting up for school. I'd be sat at the table in my school uniform eating my Weetabix, and I'd hear him come in the door. He'd drop his bag down in the same place on the kitchen floor with his jacket chucked on top. Then he'd land in his chair and lean against the kitchen wall with the seat creaking beneath him while he stretched his legs out. He used to tell me what jobs he were doing that day, what were doing his head in, and he used to tell me what were going on with all the folks who worked there. Mick Turner, Big Sean, Pam Hardcastle. They were like characters out of a storybook. Work was like this magical playground where adults went on an adventure every day, and they got to operate machines and drive trucks and win arguments. But when I started getting older, I don't know. My dad's stories started sounding all the same. I lost interest. I think I got sick of hearing certain bits. I think my dad had got sick of work full stop by then. Once I asked him how Mick Turner were doing, and Dad just gave us a strange look and said, "Mick Turner's been left ages." I didn't really want to stay on for A-levels, but that's what everyone else were doing, so I just sort of went along with it. I got bored pretty quickly. I'd already started working Saturday mornings at the farm by then. My dad knew old Mr. Jackson, so he put a word in for us. By the time it got to study leave and exams, I was working most mornings. The teachers had already given up on us by then. I remember the day of my geography exam. I turned up at school on my ped straight from the farm. I walked into the school hall covered in muck and straw and sat down at the little desk, feeling like the only grown-up in a school full of kids. I had the smell of real work on me. Not like our geography teacher, Mr. Winters, mincing up and down between the desks with the smell of tuna sandwiches and Nescafe wafting after him like a stale cape. I scrawled a few answers on the exam, then I stood up 10 minutes before the end and strolled out with my helmet slung off my elbow and a smug smile sprayed across my face. I remember that solid clump of my boots across the whole floor and feeling like the smartest kid to ever outgrow that stupid school. I thrashed the ped out of the car park while the other kids were still sat in the exam. On the way back to the farm, I pulled into the transport cafe on the A19 and I sat with the truck drivers and other blokes in high-vis and I ate a bacon and sausage sarnie and I felt like a proper fucking man. And then I went to work. That summer after exams was a right laugh. That's when I got the flat. That one above where the video shop used to be at the bottom of Main Street. I was the only one who had their own place, so obviously it turned into the party flat. Whoever were in the new inn at last orders, they used to come back to mine. I wired up a speaker in the corner and I bought a couple of old lights off Disco Andy. I gave Robbo a key and him and Melon used to crash most weekends. Anyone in our year who had a birthday party that summer, it ended up back at that flat. But then September came round and everyone else fucked off to university, didn't they? I thought they'd all be sick of learning and all, but Even Mellon went to Sunderland to do sports studies or sports science or something. PE, basically. I were an absolute legend for having that flat. But the next thing you know, they've all cleared off and left me with naught but a line of empty body bottles on the windowsill and a crusty co-op bag full of tampons and johnnies down the back of the bog. But I had cash in my pocket every week, and I'd got to know the few of the older lads in the new inn by then, so I didn't really care. And anyway, I still had the flat. That's how I met Vince. He was the landlord. His full name's Adrian Vincent, but I never knew anyone dared call him Adrian to his face. He was the local hard case. The joke in the new inn was that he'd walked like he'd shat himself while carrying 2 carpets, but I hardly ever saw him walk anywhere. They reckon even the teachers at school used to call him Vince. Every Friday night, he'd be sat in his saxo in a sports club car park, and I had to go down and pay him the rent in cash. I had to stand there in that raw wind whipping across the footy field while he counted the notes I'd give him, with a sickly waft of hash and aftershave leaking out of the window wound half down. I was just glad he didn't come round the flat. Anyway, then winter started biting in, didn't it? I used to get up for work and eat my Weetabix sat in front of the shitty little electric fire in the flat, but by the time it were actually starting to get warm, I had to get my boots on and go. We were breaking ice on the tops of the troughs some mornings, and then my ped broke down and that fucked everything. I got a lift out there with Noddy Atkinson for a couple of weeks. I knew him from the pub, but he were a snide old bastard. If I weren't waiting at the end of the road when he drove past on a morning, he used to go without us. And one week in December, I missed 2 days in a row, and old Mr. Jackson phoned me up and told me not to bother coming anymore. Said he was going to get someone more reliable. I told him I'd get my ped fixed and then I'd be reliable again, but by the time I surfaced from my Christmas hangover, it was January. I was skint, and the ped was still fucked. I asked about round town for a job, but they were now going. I didn't dare sign on, my dad would have killed me. I asked him to borrow us some money to get the ped fixed, but he just did this snide smirk and he said, "You stood on your own 2 feet now." I was shitting myself that first week. I had to go down to meet Vince with no rent in my pocket. But if I didn't go down, I knew he'd only come looking for us, and that would have been worse. He were parked broadside across 3 spaces at the bottom of the sports club car park, down next to the kiddies' playground. He watched us walking all the way down, same as always. I was trying to look casual, trying not to look at him until I got to the car, so I just kept staring ahead at that big plastic frog bin by the playground gate. It was made of this yellow plastic, but after all them years of swallowing rain and rubbish in a damp corner of the car park, it were covered in this greeny black mould. Like that stuff that grows in the corner of the shower that you can never scrub out. Like a disease. Anyway, I walked up to the car window like normal. I told Vince that old Mr. Jackson were only paying us once a month now. Something to do with tax, I said. I don't know. I said I'd pay him 4 weeks' rent at the end of the month. I remember I had to keep my hands in my jacket pockets so he wouldn't see him shaking. Vince took 3 or 4 sharp drags on his fag to pull the cherry into a hot point. Then he leant over the passenger seat and flicked it out through the open window. It went straight in the frog's mouth. He took a swig out of the can of Red Alert next to the handbrake and looked at me like I was supposed to say something else. I had nothing else to say, so I just said again I'd pay him 4 weeks' rent at the end of the month. He looked me up and down, like he knew I were pushing my luck. Like he knew what were going to happen, and he says, "You fucking better do." Then he swung the car around and I had to jump out the way like a dickhead. I looked at the frog bin with all this plasticky smoke chugging out its mouth and the tips of little flames flickering in the back of its throat, still with that same stupid grin on its face. I shouted to Vince through the passenger window, "Here, bin's on fire!" Like an idiot. But he just smirked and went, "Your problem now, son." And he floored it out the car park and left me stood there listening to the thud of his music fade away while he drove off up the village. Me just stood there with a bin melting in on itself next to me. Thank you.